Hello, friends. Welcome to Experience Data Talk, a show featuring data science leaders and technologists from around the world. My name is Mike Delgado, and today we're honored to chat with Jillian Kowalchuk, founder and CEO of Safe in the City, a company focused on designing safety in digital and physical spaces. And if you haven't seen the app yet, make sure to go to safeinthecity.com and look at the top navigation and click on the live map to check out the crowdsourced instances of harassment, racism, and crimes happening in London. The data is used to help people navigate the city safely and provide insights to the police on where harassment and crimes are more likely to take place. Jillian has won numerous awards for her work and recently listed among the top 20 women in data in the UK. Jillian holds a master's in science degree in public health from London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and a bachelor's degree in psychology. We talk with her about the way she's navigated her career, pursued her passions, and steps she went through to launch Safe in the City. We also talk with her about mentorship, practicing self-care, and how she's managed her various career transitions, and also knowing when to move on. At the end of the interview, we talk with her about self-doubt and tips for those of us who struggle with imposter syndrome. This episode is jam-packed with tons of helpful tips that she's learned on her entrepreneurial journey. Here's our conversation. Well, Jillian, thank you so much for being part of Data Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
You were honored as one of the top 20 women in data by Women in Data UK. I was wondering if you could start there. Tell me a little bit about what that experience was like for you and just receiving that top honor in the United Kingdom.
Yes, it was very unexpected and something that I'm very honored to be entitled with. So actually one of the board members was in the audience at one of my TED Talks. So it was after there's some mingling that goes on, and she said, "Hey, I have this this thing that I would like to talk to you about. It's called Women in Data." Kind of, at that point, I think I wasn't really digesting too much information. I probably had my speech going through my head, but I followed up with her, and she said that she wanted to put my name forward for this Women in Data, and I started to look into it a little bit more and kind of came right at the tail end of the nomination period. So was able to make it in and found out that I was selected, which was an incredible honor to be awarded. And it felt like a title that actually I really could embrace. I come from data in all its forms and very passionate about more people seeing the opportunities in data. So being in that community, having that recognition was definitely a highlight of last year.
That is super cool. So you mentioned the TED Talk, and when I was looking at your LinkedIn bio in preparation for today's show, I saw the TED Talk that you had listed there. Can you tell me a little bit about how that all happened? Because getting invited to the TED stage is a huge, awesome opportunity, and not many people get to do this. So can you tell us a little bit about how that all happened for you?
Yes. Actually, now that you've mentioned it, it was actually at another talk that I was giving that someone had found me and said, "I really think you should go for this." It was a TEDx Square Mile, so in a really iconic part of London, at the Barbican Centre, if anyone knows it. And so I applied and got in. I didn't think I would get in. And yeah, spent quite a lot of time trying to repackage my story to be able to say it in an eloquent way, but it really rooted down in I guess equality. Myself, I'm born in Canada, but I grew up in the Middle East in Yemen, so very different kind of cultural change to be exposed to as a child, although kind of where you land and your family is, you just kind of accept and adapt. But there definitely was a recognition of privilege and, inequalities that didn't really exist to the same capacity in Canada. And after experiencing really briefly one of the civil wars that happened in the mid-90s, we had to leave. And I think that memory of feeling unsafe just really stuck with me. And also that guilt and confusion about how we were able to flee and got so much support in doing so, whereas, the Yemeni people were still to this day living in quite a terrible environment. So it definitely set me on a different path of how I could help people. And it's brought me to psychology. It brought me around the world, traveling and understanding different groups of people, and recognizing not only our, the differences, but also mostly the similarities between us, and that we do want to be safe. We do want the freedom to, design and live out our lives to the full capacity, that we crave love and happiness and, desire challenge. So those are things that really stuck with me, and it definitely built an exposure to a larger world, which, took, I guess, my concept of psychology into a larger realm in public health and epidemiology, which is how I found myself in London, studying at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and, very different objectives at that point in my life. It was more research focused and HIV, and it did take me to the UK and Canada and Uganda to do some different projects around the world on that. And then, but one of the things that struck me was that, as much as I'm very passionate about HIV and, again, sexual education and just awareness of the scale of the problem, it also wasn't something that I had lived experience of. So I was craving or looking for something a little bit more connected to me that I also lived through. And that's when I started to see the overlap with technology and using technology, as I'm quite a techie person, or had a lot of interest in that, even in early days of public health, trying to kind of maybe move people into uncomfortable spaces of like, why can't we design some of the research intervention on this device that these young people are using? But that really started to shape kind of how I started to see things, especially around the data and how much data these, giant tech companies are starting to have the opportunities to have, but set it in a different lens, set it as a more of an intentional purpose of how we can design equality from, our everyday devices, to shift a lot of things instead of just maybe shifting capitalism and a lot of the other advancements into space and self-driving cars. Like, why can't we also look at the things that were very slow to change, like poverty and peace and equality, gender equality, or all types of equality? So, yeah, I guess that's a little bit of a long answer to your question, but that's encapsulates a little bit of the TEDx talk, Equality by Design, and also, again, kind of feeding into that passion around data and technology.
It's always fascinating to me to learn about people's journeys, and especially like just your amazing background, having traveled to so many different places, having so many different, very unique experiences. Like, I never traveled at all. So to hear like you getting exposure to so many different cultures, and then your own personal passions to get involved in learning about HIV and things you can do, and also just your love of data and technology, like with just your amazing experiences and backgrounds, and also just interests, how did you begin to, just early on, like begin to focus in on what you wanted to study? Because that's a really hard, like I've been chatting with a lot of people who are in school right now, and their difficulty is like, well, I'm really interested in technology. I'm also interested in the health space. And it's really hard for people to kind of like focus in on, okay, what do I go after? So I'm just curious, like, how did you kind of navigate that period as you had all these different interests, you can go in so many different directions. How did you kind of narrow down the path you wanted to take?
It's a great question. And I think there is this illusion that there is kind of only one path and one career, and you have to, pick that early on and stick with it. I think hopefully that's wearing as we're seeing people shift into all sorts of careers at different times in their life, 80-year-olds starting their own entrepreneurial startups, to, people doing some incredible things. I think I saw a 16-year-old who started her own law firm. Wow. So for me, it was very much a journey of experimentation, to be very honest. I knew that rooting in psychology was, kind of that love and interest and passion about how I could help people. And I thought that certainly would be a cornerstone to whatever else I would choose from that point forward. But it also does have a challenge of kind of steering you in a direct path if you're looking for that. And so after my psychology degree, it brought me to kind of a point where I just wanted to kind of explore and travel and understand myself better. I'd, been through some quite challenging periods early in life, including my mother passing away at 19 and kind of family issues. So it set me back on kind of that path of travel, which I embraced quite early on. And so I found myself in New Zealand as a social worker. Then I pursued actually some makeup apprenticeship and a business in that quite early on. Then hospitality, teaching English in Japan, working in insurance and business development. And so it definitely, for me, I would almost say just go for where your passion is. And from also, exploring these different things also did bring that there is a lot of underlying things, especially around soft skills of how do you work with a team, how do you build trust, how do you, be able to read between the lines and kind of solve problems maybe in a innovative way, especially cross-culture, kind of complexities coming into that as well. And public health, I think, felt like it wasn't a very well-known, I think, job title or even career I'd been exposed to. It happened to be one of my good friends who studied at the same university a few years before me. And she was more or less like, I can't believe you're not in public health. Like the way that you travel, the way that you're so passionate about helping a lot of people, you like big challenges that have, long-term issues that you could dive and sink your teeth into a number of problems. So that certainly was part of it. But I would also encourage a lot of young people to not be too fixated and stressed on, finding that. I think it is that journey and enjoying that journey and growing through it, making that path kind of unique to yourself. And throughout it definitely, now looking back, it's clearer to me that I was an entrepreneur in some ways. There wasn't really the word. I think I used, at one point I was quite interested in being an inventor, but didn't really know what to invent. So I think, it also shifts with the times. Like we're in a very unique time where running your own startup and business consultancy freelance, it starts to become a lot more accessible. There's so much material and role models online to learn from. So it's quite a unique opportunity to dive into a lot of different things and trial it out even on a voluntary or internship basis. So there's not, that kind of solidarity. There's so many different jobs being available all of the time and more people creating new ones. So just, I would say my advice would be to just keep evolving as until your kind of compass is pointed in the right direction.
I love that. And I love how you never got fixed in a certain subject. Like you just let your passions kind of drive you and you were okay with letting things go. And I think that's the hard thing for a lot of us, is that you go down a certain path or a certain career field. And then I've talked to a lot of friends where there comes a certain point where people might feel stuck. Like, oh, well, I can't change now. I've done this degree program, or I've been in this career field for 10 years. I kind of got to stick with it now. But I love your perspective of actually you don't. Actually, you can pursue other things, and your skill set, the soft skills you've learned, your experiences can easily adapt into other fields. You just have to look for it. I'm curious, as you kind of went to different countries and tried different things, and as you said, experimented. I love that word that you used. At what point did you kind of let something go? You were going down one path, even teaching, and this was interesting to you. obviously, teaching is a lot of work. You have to be passionate about education, passionate about helping others. And then at some point, like that transition, I'm really curious about those transitions, because those are the hardest times to like, when do I let go of this that I was super passionate about at one point and then move in this new direction? Can you talk about those like pivotal points for you?
Yes, absolutely. And you're bang on. There's certainly a bias of kind of inbuilt in us, in that if you've invested in one thing, you just want to keep going because you don't know whether that's going to end, even if you're not quite happy in the process. And I think part of it is going back to just check in on yourself to be able to say, am I actually enjoying this process anymore? Like, what is the actual end goal? And is it supposed to be this difficult or, not difficult, like I think difficulty is good, but if it's miserable in the process, or, you're not growing, then that's certainly an indicator that there's something probably that needs to shift. And I think the more that you can take control of that situation, I think the more that you can recalibrate to different challenges and kind of reset. And I think for me, it was certainly all of these, I guess, points of experimentation through different careers and countries and, I guess, cultures, and growing up in general. It certainly helped me understand myself more, my weaknesses, my strengths, and knowing, I think, that I've been able to accomplish so much in a short amount of time, and breaking those habits by, being, again, young and being like, well, my visa's up in a year, got to move to a different country, or, permanently, quite a permanent change to live on the other side of the world in New Zealand, for example. So I think that if you inbuild these even micro challenges within that, these other hurdles that you come across, everyone will, don't become so all encompassing, but potentially, like, if you're already kind of used to those challenges and overcoming them and knowing that you'll be okay, and new opportunities will come, or you can get educated in a different sector, or you can volunteer, dip your toes into a new job even without potentially leaving your other one. I think there's a lot to keeping an open mind, but keeping that compass and intuition on course to know that transition feels right. And that certainly for me it was always going in with that kind of mindset of it's an exploration, it's part of the journey.
Like in those journeys, as you pursued different passions and tried out different jobs or explored different opportunities, the hard thing, especially when you're very passionate about a certain subject or field, is knowing when it's time for you to move on, or knowing when that project isn't taking off like you thought it was going to be. Like, because I think like what's hard for anybody like driven like you, entrepreneur, like you just go hard on something you believe in. Sometimes there comes a point where that thing isn't working out the way you thought. And as you project maybe into the future, no matter how driven you are, maybe this isn't going to work out for me. And letting go of something that you were really passionate about, a project, a business, a career field, is super hard, especially when it's like you're giving it your all. And at some point you're like, you know what? I think this is probably not the right path for me. Because I think that's the hard thing, because we talk a lot of times we'll hear about just keep pushing, just keep pushing ahead. But at some point, there's certain things where it's like, actually, you also need to know when it's time to move on.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think, going into it, knowing that, this is potentially not going to, actually most likely not going to work out in the way that I have projected it. We can't predict the future. It's inevitable that there's going to be challenges and failures and mistakes along the way. And, being able to draw that line is definitely signals and things that you need to pay attention to. For me, I think it was around, I think, research, academia wasn't really a good fit for me. And I think I did know that, but I also thought that was the easier, or not the easier path at all. I thought that was a path that I could see a career in. And again, and going back to really rooting in myself, I'm like, but I don't need a clear path. Like, I actually thrive in unclear territory and, a lot more complex and versatile environments. So I think that was certainly a lesson that I that I learned, not the hard way. I guess all of it is hard, but it definitely changed who I thought I was going to become. In my degree, I was, I'm very passionate about public health, and I still think I've incorporated it into Safe in the City. But, the kind of structures and even signals that other friends are like, are you sure that research is really your thing? Like, I can't really see you as an academic. But again, I was fixated on like, well, this is now this kind of later stage degree, and I need to kind of follow the rules that people say you need the one career. And I think the more I listened to that and was pushed off course, then the more likely I was to probably come to this conclusion, versus, again, kind of being like, well, I can incorporate this. I certainly am someone who is, wanted to always kind of have a team and be able to drive something forward. And again, since I was a child, just small things like that I could see these trails of. So I certainly think that it's important to check in, and that also, I did balance out working, wrapping up my role as a researcher and starting to explore business. So I actually did, stage it out before I actually just kind of, shut that door and went forward. And of course I had my doubts and, what are people going to think? And, is this, family thinking, oh, this is not very serious, or she wants to be professionally broke again. Like, what? How did we do such a terrible job? No. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. It's a really good question, diving deep. But yeah, not all. I think it's just coming back to who you are and trying to use that versus the outside world and pressures to guide your decisions.
And it's really hard when, like, mentioning your family, like, you're trying to obviously make smart decisions for your career, pursuing your passions, making sure that you can, are going to be financially secure in the path you take. So I love that you're taking like these stages, the stage approach, kind of experimenting, like, is this going to work? But then at the same time, you have family and loved ones speaking into your life, like, what are you doing? Like, you have a path. Like, it seems like staying in academia, like researching, you love that kind of stuff, and teaching, like, you're going to help others. Like, it seems like that's the path for you. And then you're like, record scratch, like, actually, I want to go in this direction. How do you navigate that period when you have all this feedback coming in? Because obviously you're very self-aware, like, your own interests, and you're getting feedback from others to just fine-tune yourself. How do you kind of navigate those difficult times where you have people that you love and respect telling you, I'm not sure you're going the right way, Jillian?
That's another, fantastic question, and not an easy answer to kind of probably provide. But I think for me, it certainly was, I had to kind of build up the courage and confidence that I've explored this enough that I seriously am now going to kind of announce it to certain people, or, stage it to my maybe friends that are kind of you can do anything, I believe in you, kind of like start there, Tony Robbins types of people, and then go into the kind of, grandmother, the territory, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Right.
Build in those confidence. And I think definitely surrounding yourself with more people, like, as I staged into entrepreneurship and technology, I surrounded myself with more people who were, often, changed a totally different career path to set out on this. So I created, I guess, a bit of a community and a norm around what I was doing, which helped me feel more comfortable that, probably breaking away from maybe more people in my life who'd follow more traditional kind of paths of career and expectations and things like that. So it became easier to have that base, and then kind of show people in. And I also thought it was quite important to actually, not just talk, but actually show. So quite early on, when I had the idea of Safe in the City, I invited, probably a dozen friends over and cooked them baking. And I was like, look, I have some business ideas I'd like to share with you and get your honest feedback. And again, that was just a really safe place that I could show them some prototypes, and they were very impressed that I had gone that, to that level to actually do this. It wasn't just like, oh, well, this idea of the day. It's like, okay, she's put some serious time and thought, and I'm going to have a serious kind of response to this. So I think the more that you can demonstrate on your own time that you are willing to kind of look at these things and also address kind of the risks or the apprehensions of these types of things. Like, well, Jill, you're not a coder. You don't know much about technology field. It's like, okay, well, actually I registered for a course. I started coding. Like I'm now in these communities, or I've, started these accelerator programs, and it helps them feel a lot more secure that you're managing those risks, and you're aware of those, and, that you're kind of making sure that everything will be as okay as you can. But, we only have one life. And I think if that's, if it's all kind of focused in on a certain number in the bank at all times, or, then there probably will be tensions in other areas of your life that are holding you back.
I'm just thinking about your parents, and it's funny because like I'm thinking about my own daughter, and like when she starts to pursue her passions, and I'm thinking I want to make sure she's financially secure. So I'm just envisioning, like, if my daughter came to me and like, oh, I want to totally just like stop this academic path that I thought was like, well, this is going to be financial security for you. Like this seemed like, and then you're going into uncharted territory, and I'm worried. And so like the parent, the loved ones are like, they want to make sure that you're going to be safe and secure. And so that's got to be really, really tough.
Yeah, I suppose. But I think because of my, being able to travel quite a bit and be in all sorts of different places, and manage quite well, I think they did build a confidence that like, okay, well, Jill will be okay. She'll figure it out. And I also think that was an important thing for me to really realize in myself, that I'm like, no matter what, I'll find a way. Like I have a great network who can support me. I, can jump into another career and, luckily in the UK, like there are jobs available that I could be, skilled at, or I would be able to get. So I am coming from I think a very privileged background, that I have all of those opportunities. So I do think the size of risk can be calibrated slightly, to be able to kind of also take advantage of this time where I don't have children, I don't have a mortgage, I don't have maybe some of these other responsibilities that might have to factor in like some other people. So I think, traveling was definitely my gateway, and, being open to all different types of jobs to understand what is it that I truly want to do. Knowing that navigation compass was always around helping people, that it had to be something that I had also experienced and had this kind of lived problem, and that it could kind of blend in my expertise into kind of a package, which I think, has interestingly become Safe in the City.
And before we jump into Safe in the City, I want to get your advice for those listening in. For like, Jillian, like I'm very inspired by what you've done. I want to do my own tech startup. I want to launch an app. I want to do something. What should I know before I even begin this journey? What would be some things you would say, like maybe some cautions And also just from your own experiences, like things they should be aware of before launching that startup, that app, dedicating part of their life to that thing.
Yes, no, it's a great question. And it's something that actually, as a female founder, I've started to coach other female founders. I mean, all types of people, but mostly seems to be female founders who are earlier on their journeys. So have come across quite a few of these questions. In terms of, what do you need to be aware of? I think it's very important that you do kind of your baseline research to understand, like, are their products doing the exact same thing that you want to do? And where is this kind of unique selling point really going to come into? So I think that's a really key thing. I think some people have this great idea and then kind of run with it, forgetting all the steps of, looking at intellectual property and looking at, other competitors and, have apps or technologies like that existed before and failed, and then why. So I think doing as much background research to test the viability of your idea is really important, and certainly things that I think a lot of people might fall into, that excitement and kind of community that you're starting. Certainly be very careful of like who you trust and who you bring into that network. I certainly felt as a newcomer to technology, a foreigner also living in the UK, and I think also factoring in being a woman, that there were different layers of considerations that I think I had a bit of naivety, which can also maybe be a good thing to jump into something crazy. But I think for me, again, going into trusting your intuition about people who want to help, or, say that they'll do something, or, doesn't quite feel right to do business with, or join the team, or be a mentor, accelerator program, whatever it has to be. I think being able to listen to your gut is a really important aspect that I think you need to trust more and more throughout the process. And again, building a bit of like resiliency. There's so many things that I think we forget to talk about. Like, I know work-life balance is kind of that umbrella arm of running your own company, but I think coming into having a really dedicated morning and evening routine, like making sure that you're exercising, that you're doing meditations and priming, and that you're setting goals and you're measuring whether they're going in that direction, is super important to make sure that you're in tune, because the more off tune you are, if you're too busy, if you're too stressed out, if you're angry, that you're not thinking clearly and you're not able to make those critical decisions as well. So I think making sure that you're taking care of yourself, and then obviously the team comes after that, is really important and often overlooked. It's just kind of like drive as hard as you can. There's kind of Silicon Valley mentality that's rippled around the world of, don't sleep, just kind of go. And I think hopefully, in this time too with Corona, that's definitely quieted a lot of the, events and different things that were happening that maybe you had that expectation that you had to do, but actually kind of getting back to basics has been a really important reminder of that.
I love that. That's all like solid advice. Really, really helpful. And I also love that you talked about just self-care, because there's like that mentality on social, all the memes about like hustling and working hard, and part of that, like sacrificing your health sometimes, like, or your sleep. And I'm really glad that you talked about just the importance of self-care, mental health, making sure that you're taking, because that's going to drive you. That's going to give you the energy to go through all the difficulties. That's going to be part of the journey. If you're not mentally healthy, taking care of yourself, you're going to have very little energy, drive, passion to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. You make way more mistakes when you're not in that alignment. And I think the more that you can, stack those things, those like, whether it's your kind of your family or your close friends that can also, that you work out or you go for a walk with, that, they'll be like, why why do you keep canceling? Like, what's going on? And they can help signal to you that something's off balance is really important. So for example, I also started one of the business ideas that I pitched to my friends in that earlier conversation was a food blog called Vegnostic, and it was about cooking and something I am very passionate about. And also I felt, this is important actually to start at the same time, because the more that I'm eating well and I'm accountable to kind of sharing that and growing that aspect and hobby of mine, then, the more I'm going to actually likely be on track and in a good place, like knowing myself. So I think it's not necessarily about, chill time and things like that. I think it's stacking the good behaviors that will take care of you, and also advance the things that you want to achieve in your life.
I love that you worked in this other project to keep you accountable and also intentional about taking care of yourself just through the food that you're eating.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And the coaching goes the same. All of the things I've learned, just being able to reiterate them to different people that adds value to those, awful mistakes or, embarrassments, or, even just really great things that I've learned and opportunities that I can open for different people. Like, I think even starting, mentoring someone else who's maybe a little bit earlier on in their process just helps you refine those messages and compile it and, think about the wider issues, but also how your company or your idea isn't necessarily, you can fall into so many different traps and so many different things. And that net win, the more that you embed yourself into the ecosystem and you can help others. And I think the more that, even if your company doesn't work out, maybe you'll be hired for the next unicorn, or, there's so many opportunities in there. So I think keeping that broad lens and perspective of what you're trying to achieve, and finding that tribe so that you can, help each other grow is also, again, one of those things that I think is very undervalued, but definitely a pillar to kind of how I would believe I'm successful.
I love that you're mentoring and just giving back in that way to help up these new founders, these young people who are starting their careers, doing something new, looking to you for advice. And I love how transparent you are with your own journey and even sharing your own failures along the way with them. Can you talk a little bit about, in that mentorship process? So one of the things that comes up a lot is self-doubt, imposter syndrome. Because anytime you're doing anything new, of course you're going to be doubting. You haven't done it before. It's just part of the process. And self-doubt, imposter syndrome can unfortunately also cripple us. It can stop us in our tracks. And I'm wondering, as you've counseled and mentored other people, I'm sure this has come up. How do you deal, or advice you'd give to those who are struggling, because we all struggle with it, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and how to navigate those periods?
I think that's great. And I think, as you said, it's something that everybody struggles with, from the, Bill Clintons, or that just name came to mind, to, people that you wouldn't even imagine have any kind of confidence issues. They're going to have those periods and doubts, especially when you're trying out something new. I think being very aware of comparison is a big thing. Why am I not there? You're seeing the social media, the awards, the other things, and you're trying to compare yourself, which I think will feed into that self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Is just definitely making sure that you have a check on that is important. I think, reaching out and being vulnerable to connect to people and setting out those things can also open up floodgates of people really truly showing, their kind of mistakes or how things don't work as it looks like. So I think it's also important to lead by example, by, being honest and authentic with your own experiences, to open up and see that actually everybody's sharing in a lot of these. So I think making sure that you have that trusted network to do so, but also creating those safe spaces. one of the things that I did, as I mentioned, kind of feeling like, wow, I'm an imposter, like a woman in tech, like I've never done this before. I would have said I was more of a data or a research person. I created a group called Femme Tech Talks, and it was actually to bring together women in technology or had interest in technology to create a space that we could actually speak about, often not just kind of the how do we do spreadsheets or shareholders agreements, or how do you code, which tech stack is the best. It was actually more of the underlying kind of like, how do you deal with people talking over you all the time, or how can you deal with a colleague who's sexually harassing you, or how do I feel confident in a maybe all room full of all men, and I feel like they're probably not going to take me seriously. So I think that was really important because it created that community. If it doesn't exist, you can always create it. There's so many outlets for that. So I think, being able to lead by your own example, and then you see a lot more people will connect to you on that, and it can help in that process of just, relieving a little bit of that doubt because you're proving to yourself. And I think also just, doing things outside of your business, like sometimes the biggest achievement in some days would be me actually cycling to a meeting, because I used to love cycling, and cycling in London is quite a intimidating thing, at least pre-COVID. So sometimes, even these micro achievements build that confidence in yourself that you're like, I can do this. I've never, been in this situation where nobody was there to help me. I was abandoned and, homeless, and these situations can happen, but you've found a way out of them, right? Or maybe they've never happened because you can remember those memories of the people who really helped you out. And again, just making sure that you're aware of those and appreciative of those to actually build more of that confidence, see that other people are feeling like imposters or they have their own doubts. So yeah, hopefully kind of erode this kind of maybe social media image or startup image that is quite predominant.
Yeah, I love that. And I was actually chatting with a friend, and we're talking about how I think imposter syndrome, self-doubt has a bad rap, because I feel like whenever we feel it, we're on the right path. We're doing something that's challenging us to the point where we're actually doubting ourselves. And I feel like it's actually a good thing. I'm trying to do a better job of embracing it.
Yes,
I'm feeling this crippling feeling, nervous. I'm like, I just gotta embrace, that's actually the right path for me. I need to
exactly.
If I'm not getting that signal, if I'm not feeling that discomfort, I'm not pushing myself enough. I need to lean into that discomfort more.
That's definitely true. And I think especially with public speaking and different things, reorientating that nervousness is I care so much. I want to do so well, and I've prepared and I've done all the things that I know I can do to achieve it. But yeah, having that doubt to kind of play in and use it as a motivator, use it as something that you can orientate to drive a bit harder or practice a little bit more, or do a better job. I think, without falling into the perfectionism sphere, but yeah. But yeah, I think that's certainly a really good point. If you're feeling nervousness and I could fail, but also this excitement and anticipation, then you're probably on the right track of again kind of aligning with that purpose and passion that can help get you to the next step.
It's funny, I just read this article the other day about there's been different performers like David Bowie and even Beyonce who have taken on personas. Sasha Fierce for Beyonce, and David Bowie had multiple personas, Ziggy, Stardust. And what I was reading is that these personas were sometimes created to kind of shield and also provide well, I can do this if I'm this persona. And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe that a David Bowie or a Beyonce, who are amazing artists, they can do anything, would actually feel self-doubt and actually created personas to actually push ahead.
Yes, I actually watched a Dolly Parton documentary, and very much the same, like this persona that she's put on, and almost nobody has seen her without full hair, makeup, dressed up. And I certainly think that is something quite important to, know the barriers that you're willing to share with, what's your intimate life and what's your professional life. Because I think in a startup, it can get very blurred, and that you're kind of, with myself, like, starting out as a solo founder and just talking about Safe in the City in all formats I could, it blended my story and kind of the identity of the business, maybe at some points a little bit too much, that it was difficult to kind of untangle. So I think it does serve a purpose to create, that persona, and whether it is just a piece of clothing or, a hairstyle that you can, keep up, or it can create that, I guess, comfort to push that side of you, which again, you can show to the world, but also keep some of your maybe intimate things a little bit more. I certainly haven't found that exact balance. I feel like I'm a little bit too much of an open book, but I think there's something to that. And I think more and more entrepreneurs are going into that almost performance, and, people seeing their lives and wanting to know more, celebrity status to a certain degree if you're quite successful. And so, almost like a performer, perhaps that is something that you need to embrace.
I can't believe that we're 50 minutes in. We haven't even talked about Safe in the City, which is like it's been a whole teaser. This has been a whole teaser for, like, we're talking about the launch of, like, a very important website, Safe in the City, your company. And for 50 minutes, we've been teasing it out. So now,
there we go.
Let's talk about Safe in the City. Share with us whatever you want to about Safe in the City. And I have a lot of questions. So, like, why don't you tell everyone about what we've been, like, alluding to for the last 50 minutes?
It's true. It's been such a great conversation. I was just like, I don't know what time it is, but I don't care. So yeah, Safe in the City. I'll start with kind of where I got the idea from, and kind of fast forward you through some of the process. So as I mentioned, I moved permanently to the UK after my master's degree, and still was relatively new to getting around different areas of London. So used navigation apps like Google Maps and City Mapper quite often, but found that they were often taking me the fastest route, which didn't always feel like the safest one. And after one particular incident where I followed the route through an alleyway, which was vacant at the time, but then within a few seconds, there was 2 kitchen staff who walked out. It escalated quickly. They got up in my face and blocked my way, saying different things that they were going to do, so threatening sexual assault. And I was clearly quite scared in that time, but tried to keep a stern face. And unfortunately, I had been in situations like that before, and got out of the situation, met my friend, told her what happened at this restaurant. And, she also recounted different experiences similar to that. And I couldn't really leave behind that actually there's so many more people following that route, like maybe right now. And how often are these, kitchen staff going to take a smoke break? And I think that started to build that pattern of, wait a minute, there's a lot of information that just happened in that time period and continues to happen with nothing really being addressed. So, I recognize my own kind of, I guess, place in that, like how I was kind of acting, and that I didn't think to report it to the police or to the business. I think it may have crossed my mind, but I was just like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't want to, be late, and just want to enjoy my night, like, forget about this. here I am, not forgetting about it.
Right.
Ultimate not forgetting about it. So I started to, I guess, sink in this idea of, well, what if a navigation app actually had more safety functionality to let you know about the route that you're walking or the types of experiences people have had, as well as, using the technology to actually maybe personalize routes for different groups of people. So we're not all treated the same, as they've more or less kind of been designed with probably the people who developed them. And so that definitely started to, I guess, motivate me to start talking to a lot more people about this. The resounding kind of feedback was, I can't believe this doesn't exist. And I looked quite thoroughly in terms of, the applications that were out there. There were lots and lots of safety applications about, track my walk or respond in emergency, or 6 friends get this emergency message, but it was very reactionary. And I guess from a public health point of view, you're always trying to look at the more preventative side of, well, what if before I walked into that situation, I had some sort of indication that there would maybe pattern behavior there that I wouldn't want to walk through. So that was, I guess, a bit of the genesis of Safe in the City, using a navigation app or using everyday technologies that could also provide you information about safety and give you the opportunity to input either experiences that you had or the perceptions of safety, so that we could actually tailor the technologies that could be designed while using data and intelligence to actually improve it. So that was the early stages. So Safe in the City now, we're launched in London and Berlin. So it acts like a navigation app, getting you from point A to point B. So it's friendly to anyone to use, because I think often some of the personal safety apps might be for a certain demographic or age group. And this is supposed to normalize that we all want safety information, and we all want the ability to share that to make a difference for someone else's journey, or again, in general, just being able to change the way things have been. And so we developed I guess it's called the MVP in an accelerator program, and which was all about geospatial science, which again was another field that I was starting to become a lot more fascinated with. And we launched on International Women's Day in 2018 in the Mayor of London's or London and Partners office, and it was certainly. It certainly kind of kicked off quite a lot of press and conversations. It was around the Me Too movement that people were reporting a lot more. We tried to kind of scrape data to see how people might be reporting. And it seemed like, again, that missing piece of the puzzle is often the location. It was, this happened at this place, or this happened by this person, but then to often create in criminology, you need a location and a time. So we thought, this is actually looking at public safety and personal safety from a very, I guess, public health point of view. So the app itself is free for anyone to download and use. We're looking at how we're expanding that out, and should have some information shortly that we can share with you. But so it's primarily getting from point A to point B. You have an emergency button, so should something go wrong, we can quickly get you help to that exact location. We also work with the police to share information to your device if it was a terrorist threat, which we did alert people within 10 minutes of the London Bridge terrorist attacks, for example. So if you were traveling those routes or going to travel that route, that's something that we think everybody should have the right to know and quickly get on their device. so we work with the police to make sure that that information goes back. And then we have, so that's kind of what we call our safety toolkit, emergencies. And then we have our non-emergency safety toolkit, which is more around, again, incidents that happen. And we have a traffic light system. So are they physical, verbal, nonverbal, or environmental forms of mostly street harassment? And we also have a scoring of the walk, so that at the end you can say you score it based on your perceptions of safety. Even if nothing happened, you're just like, I don't want to walk through alleyways or parks at night, so that we can learn from that and create an algorithm that actually works for you and helps you feel safe in new areas or potentially areas around your home. And we do share anonymously. All of the information is anonymous, that we share back to the police, as well as a number of other government and then private companies that we work with, to make sure that they're aware of the scale of the problem, firstly, because this is a very common occurrence in a lot of people's lives. Like, we focused it on sexual harassment because that was my story and lived experience through a whole number of different countries and cities around the world. But also that was reflected in the global conversations and the people we were speaking to about the issues. So we're now looking at how we are extending that out into a lot more intersectionality. So different hate crimes, the LGBTQ community faces, the Black and ethnic minority communities, disability, age, all sorts of people that face these types of hateful experiences in often public spaces, but also private spaces. So that's how we developed the app and the technology to serve the purpose to get you, again, safely on your way, but contribute back to actually shape the cities and the paths that you can take and help someone else take in future. So we've been building out in the last few months some exciting technologies, like extending that out. So how actually, now that we've kind of shown how Safe in the City works, it's working really well. We've done some really pivotal projects with UN Women and again with the police, so we can measure that impact. And now we're looking at, okay, so this seems to work on our device, but of course getting one person or all people to use one app is also not the aim. It's to, make sure that everybody has that same information and access and relationships that we do to this information. So now we're building out integrations so that other technology platforms can be able to have, again, that police and alerting system, a way to get help, as well as a way to contribute your experiences, and whether they're experience of an incident or just experiences of how it feels, because we think there's a correlation to both, but also an important value of how technologies and businesses and cities can actually learn from it. So that's the, I guess, exciting thing that we're working on, and generating reports that can quickly identify and make sense out of these, gray areas that maybe societally we haven't quite nailed of, what does sexual harassment mean, or what does verbal sexual harassment mean, or what does, racial crime really look like for groups that may not understand or be able to walk in those types of shoes. This being able to use technology with that purpose to contribute, receive this, two-way street and flow of information is the way that we think we can start, bridging the gap between what's actually reported and known to maybe police or public officials or businesses, to what's the reality of what's happening. And now that we have that reality in a standardized format, now can we make sense of how we can look at how we reduce things? So the more transparent and measurable we are, the more that we're going to be able to accelerate issues of equality, but better tech products, better businesses, better customer, services based on that, because we all fundamentally want to feel safe, be respected, and enjoy our lives harassment, hate free as much as possible.
Well, it's a beautiful mission, beautiful app, and the work that you're doing is just helping a city feel safer, and letting people know, like, and having also just input from people all over the city sharing about their experiences, and being able to plot this and show the data points around where racism is happening, where harassment is happening, and then informing the police so that maybe those areas can be better patrolled so people feel even safer. I think it's brilliant. And I know we could do a whole show just on Safe in the City to talk about that. I want to
you can invite me on later.
Yeah. Before we go, I wanted to ask her just a really quick question about just COVID-19 and just the increase in all forms of racism that we're seeing online. And if you're noticing, even anecdotally, like the types of harassment things you're seeing people are reporting right now in London, are you noticing an uptick in certain types of harassment or racism?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in general, because people were during lockdown restricted to travel, we did see quite a big drop of usage. But we have maintained quite a few reports. So even close to home, there's still a lot of reports that we received. A lot of what we receive is verbal street harassment, but now that it's, tailored to a COVID world, whether it's, kind of talking about a face mask in a sexualized way, or, touching somebody when that even has even more kind of connotation and risk, it certainly adds to the level of severity, I believe, of, the situation, and that this isn't an issue that's just going to float away with a disease or a pandemic or conflict, as we've seen in other places. It shifts, and again, being able to identify those symptoms, earlier on to diagnose the problem, which is again why we believe, verbal forms of hate are just important to capture as some of the severe things that we have a lot more emphasis and means of reporting and capturing, because it does build that spectrum of, the types of experiences that are out there, and then better designs of how we address them. Like if we know that there's a specific maybe community that has an increase in racial hate crimes, and we can better tailor solutions, whether it is police intervention, or if it's educational, or if it's, campaigns and around anti-hate crimes and things like that, or the severity of hate crimes in those areas, it becomes, a lot more manageable to kind of chip away at the problem, versus it probably addressing, like most people are like, oh, this is impossible. Like we can never fix, these types of issues. They're just systemic, and we just have to live with them for the next few generations. It becomes something more manageable that we can work on. And I think, in speaking with other, we try to be very collaborative with other organizations, a lot of charities that do work in the space of capturing sexual and street harassment or hate crimes. And they're certainly saying that there's still an influx of reports coming in. So this is definitely not an issue that's gone away. We're still getting quite a few reports on our app, and anyone in the world can report it on our website. So it is something that we need to keep changing. And, I think it is also an important time in that people have been, restricted and are starting to slowly reintegrate and come back out. So capturing those numbers at more of a maybe baseline, while encouraging more people to share, is also important. Because if we don't have that level that we're all working towards and encouraging people, victims or bystanders, to come forward with reports, then we'll really never know the real size of the problem and how we address it. So again, if everyone's collectively working and recognizing how important this information is to capture and measure and monitor and alleviate risk and look at better ways to approach these problems, then we're certainly going to be tackling this for another century or more. And I think that's part of the TEDx talk, is like, how can we accelerate some of these things like space technology or self-driving cars, when we haven't even fundamentally addressed human rights violations, like women not getting the right to vote until most recently in Saudi Arabia. So how can we start merging the things of value? Because the more that society shifts towards more equitable means, the more we'll be able to advance in all sorts of spaces versus that big divide.
For those who want to get involved, the data scientists listening in who would love to help out, be part of some of the projects you're working on for Safe in the City, what are some needs you have or some advice you'd have for those who want to get involved with Safe in the City?
Yes. Well, we're certainly, open to research collaborations, I think, in different areas, whether it's transportation or, architecture and smart cities. We've been doing a lot around mobility and some work with Uber. I think that's definitely a stage where we feel quite comfortable in going around the world to be able to show how our technology works and how it can generate this intelligence that hasn't been seen or processed to the same way that we are. So I'd certainly, if you have a research idea or a gender lens on mobility, these types of things are certainly open to research collaborations. And we have, quite anyone that wants to be kind of a brand ambassador who's very passionate, already working in this space, how we can link up is also something that we're very interested in. That, safety isn't one proprietary solution. It's really making a solution that's designed to kind of connect and collaborate together. So if it is something that you've already worked on or have some expertise in, we're certainly interested to see how our solutions could work or collaborate, as well as, purely just, represent our brand and what we're trying to speak about. There's still a long ways that we have to go and recognizing these issues. And I think the more diverse experiences we have to speak to these and actually address them from people's lived experiences, the more powerful the stories and other people feel comfortable coming forward to show, how impactful, how often, how it does have a cost and consequence to not just the person directly affected.
For those who want to get in touch with you, you shared so much fantastic advice, and I know you'd be an outstanding mentor. But for those that want to be able to, find you online, follow your journey, what are the best social profiles for them to follow you on?
Yes, I'm most active on LinkedIn. I've started to do my coaching on Jillian Kowalchuk on Instagram, so you can follow that. I do little snippets. I actually did a little snippet on podcasting tips right before this, just to also make sure I've checked my process all right. And I also, if anyone's interested in food, it's called Vegnostic, if you want to follow that profile on Instagram. But I would say LinkedIn is probably the best place to catch me with any Safe in the City updates. You can check out our website. We also post updates. Our UN Women Report is something that you can also look at in terms of some of the research we've recently done. So that's safeinthecity.com. And if you are in London or Berlin, you can download the app anywhere. We're not in every location because, again, of our work with police and different city officials, but we certainly do want you to cast a vote so we also understand how which communities and cities we can bring it to next. So I think those would be the primary ways that you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. And what we'll do is on the Experian Global News blog, I will link out to all those different channels and resources. And for those listening to the podcast, the short URL will be ex.pn/safe-city. That's ex.pn/safe-city. That'll bring you over to the Experian news blog with links to all the different social profiles Jillian's on, as well as ways to connect with Safe in the City. Jillian, thank you so much for being part of Data Talk.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was a great conversation. I hope to have another one soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Data Talk podcast. We share new shows every week, and you can find the full catalog of previous episodes, including YouTube videos, on our Experian news blog. You can get access to the full catalog by going to experian.com/datatalk. And we always love hearing from our community, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future shows or guests you'd like to hear from, please let us know. You can leave a comment on iTunes, or you can reach out to us on Twitter @Experian Data Lab. You can also email me directly. My email is michael.delgado@experian.com. Take care, and we'll chat next week.